Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 4 years of law enforcement analysis experience, with 5 years of criminal justice experience overall. He is currently the criminal justice analyst at the Rocky Mountain Information Network. He holds a master's in criminal justice from Arizona State University. Please welcome Jesus Varela. Jesus, how are we doing?
Doing pretty good, Jason. How about you?
I am doing well. That introduction's a little foreign to me. It's been a while since I've done a classic interview. We've been doing a lot of these deep dive episodes with familiar guests, and it's been, I don't know, about 6 or 7 weeks, almost 2 months since I've recorded one of these classic episodes. So that seemed a little unfamiliar to me.
Well, I enjoy hearing it. I love that intro.
And so, Jesus, how often do you get someone calling you Jesus?
More often than not. I mean, my family who are Spanish speakers, they call me Jesus. So everybody in the office will occasionally call me Jesus or something of that nature.
And we met at the conference, the IACA conference, a couple of weeks ago. And so I used that opportunity to crack a joke about your name in my presentation. I have not got the results back from the reviews of the audience, so I haven't found out whether they were okay with it or absolutely hated it. All right, well, let's get started here. Before we get started here, we are going to have a call-in segment today, favorite first jobs. So if you want to share your first job, let us know, call us, and we'll get you on the program. All right, Jesus, how did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
Well, I definitely wasn't looking for it. I was working at the county attorney's office, Maricopa County, one of the largest in Arizona. And I was thinking about taking the LSAT and getting into law school. But then I was looking at the cost of all these things and having to go through the process of the bar once you finish law school. And I was not so inclined to do it. And I had a bureau chief come up to me, shout out to Karen Sharada. She said that they have a crime analysis unit, and I think it was like the supervisor had given her some insight about Arizona Association of Crime Analysts. Mm-hmm. And she was like, hey, you should really look into this. I feel like your skill set and your capabilities, like this is right up your alley. I think you'd really enjoy this kind of work. And so she introduced me to the Arizona Association of Crime Analysts. And I put in for it as far as a membership is concerned. And from there, I received the Arizona Tactical Analysis Network bulletins like BOLOs and just information sharing, and got connected with AACA. And then I saw a bunch of job postings, and that's where I found the posting for RMIN, where I work now. And it's been history ever since. But as far as like how I came to be on the show, I have to give a couple shout outs because I went to the Arizona Law Enforcement Analyst Training, which is a 40-hour prerequisite to the Analyst Academy, modeled after the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Academy. And I got connected with Aaron Wickersham, which ironically I met Aaron at the attorney's office. I took a tour of that unit and shook everybody's hand and got to meet Aaron earlier on. But later I connected with her because she was the instructor of Excel. And then, of course, Brittany Winslow, I'd seen her, information coming through the AZTAN network, but also met her through the academy. She was an instructor. Sean Rambran, who was an instructor also there. And of course, he's our AACA president. So a bunch of stuff always goes back to AACA. I met Mindy at the AACA symposium back in 2022, the Arizona symposium. And so all these folks had kind of put into my head, hey, maybe you should consider teaching a segment, AACA or even IACA. So the people that have championed me to kind of get out there, I got to give a big shout out to Brittany Winslow. I also got to give a shout out to my guy, Patrick Smith. He's our media guy for RMIN. He was like super connected out there taking photos at AACA's like annual conference, I believe it was. And he was pretty much a politician shaking hands and and meeting people, and he's like, "Hey, have you met this guy?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're more connected in this group of people than I am, ironically." And so Patrick Smith is another one. He introduced me to a bunch of people, and as it so happened, I ended up talking to the right people, and I got put in place to help cover Erin's spot teaching Excel at the academy because she was going to Google at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when Brittany and I started to co-teach, and she's the one who's been really kind of pushing me to get out there. She's a mentor of mine, and I owe a lot to AACA and Erin and Brittany and Sean and all of them. So I'm thankful.
Yeah, yeah, all those are good people. That's they all have contributed to the profession, and Erin has become quite the ambassador for law enforcement analysis. I feel like she's got her hands in a number of different cookie jars, and just I think is well respected out there and doing a lot of great things. So prior to you getting to, did you say RMIN? RMIN?
Oh, RMIN. So it's pronounced
RMIN?
RMIN, Rocky Mountain
RMIN?
Information. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So prior to that, so you mentioned being part of the court system at Maricopa County.
Right.
So you were a courtroom assistant slash bailiff.
Right.
So you are definitely the first bailiff that I've ever had on the show. What were you doing with them? And then we'll tie it to analysis.
It was such a short period of time that I was with the judicial branch. What was happening is at the time I was applying for, I'm not going to kid you on this one, I think about 50 jobs, 50. I know that a bunch of them don't pan out. There's a lot of good competitive candidates out there.
Yeah.
And then the process takes such a long time to get hired that I pretty much put out feelers everywhere. RMIN was one of the earlier ones I tested for and got waitlisted, to be honest. And I didn't think I'd actually hear back because a lot of times those waitlists expire by the end of the year. And I put in for judicial branch, and I knew some bailiffs, and really it's not in the sense of like the detention officer side of things. It's more like assisting with courtroom preparation. So what's happening is like a lot of the times when a judge hands out, say, a sentence or needs to collect like fingerprints and biometrics from one of the people in custody, I've got to get all the paperwork together to get them situated in that role. I had to collect fingerprints, and I had to get their information like in pretty much the docket ready for the day so that they have all the matters that they're going to call in order. And remember, in that era, it was like COVID, so they're all on teams, and I'm the only person physically in the court saying, "Hey, judge or commissioner, this person is present. They're right here." I would also get to say the classic "all rise." So I mean, that was
nice.
That was the one thing, but I wasn't like part of MCSO. That they're the ones that handle all of like the detainees and all the in jail stuff there.
So wait a minute. So if you were doing it during COVID and you were saying all rise, who is in the courtroom that you're saying that to?
It's usually everybody who's on the docket that day. That's the people that are in the gallery. Like everybody else, like it's all going to be virtual. The only people that were actually appearing were like obviously all the in custodies, but even people out of custody. And then there's like mind you, I was working in the probation violation section, so all of the probation violation defense attorneys were still present for the most part. So pretty much our commissioner would be in half the time or a period of the time, whereas like some days in, some days out. So
yeah. Now, is it understood that even though they're virtual, that they also rise at this time?
Oh, you mean everybody on camera has to rise up?
Yes.
I don't hold them accountable to it. I don't stop the commissioner and be like, "Hey, stop, hold on for a second there. You're not standing, sir. Take him into custody."
I don't know if anybody was doing this from home, but you might only be properly dressed from the waist up because that's all you were thinking that would be shown on camera. But that's a different story if you have to stand up.
Yeah, I'd say I also developed a bit of a radio voice. I would like lower my tone so that I would sound decent on those recordings.
That is interesting. And it seems like you did a lot with fingerprinting, which there's at least one link to analysis is that you probably have a better perspective than most analysts in terms of fingerprinting.
It was really quick. It was a quick collection of fingerprints just so that we can make sure that when we're taking somebody into custody and if they are being remanded to DOC, that you got the right individual. That's one big thing.
All right. So you get into RMIN. I don't know why I think that's so hard to pronounce. I'm almost half tempted to just say Rocky Mountain Information Network. But so just take us through there, just the first time walking in? You get the job, you're coming in for the first time, the first couple weeks. What's going through your head? What are you thinking?
It was the first time I was wearing my big boy pants. I was going to be in a
Yeah.
job that was going to require me to be out traveling, because remember, the RIS program covers all of the United States, and RMIN covers 8 states in the Rocky Mountain
Mhm.
region, to include, and I'm probably going to forget one, but Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and so on and so forth. So
Mhm.
when I go in there, I already know on the outset, well, I'm going to end up having to testify, having to travel. This is going to be like a real big boy job. And
Mhm.
as soon as I got here, I think I was not incorrect in that first perception of things, because the majority of people that were in my unit were really tenured. I mean, people have been analysts in this unit for 10, 15 years. And then the people that were like newer analysts were not young by no means. They were retired detectives, people that have been
Yeah.
got an entire career behind them. So I mean, it gave me an assurance, like a security, that I could lean on people with a lot of knowledge. Women are spectacular for being on the front lines of investigative analysis and looking at so many different kinds of data and handling so many different kinds of investigations. And then they have such a think tank of people that are really sharp to lean on, people from local PDs, from military backgrounds, from everything. So I'm really blessed to be part of this organization. I'm not just saying a pitch. I'm glad to be working for RMIN, but it was also intimidating because I was at the time one of the youngest people in age and in experience here. And now the culture is a bit shifted. Some of those people that were retired and double dipping have like full on retired or moved somewhere else. And a lot of the young blood that are coming in that are fresh out of college and have some years of internship experience, so they are a different kind of smart. Even though they don't
Mhm.
have years to back them, they're so connected to the pulse of like social media, and all these investigations rather are surrounded with the young people. They're entrenched in the slang and all these cultures and the use of platforms, and people that are coming in, they're like, I had this application, I know exactly how this is supposed to look, and something's missing here. They're picking up pieces of the puzzle that maybe older folks aren't catching on to. So it's really neat to have like a good, I guess, an amalgam of like everybody's culture put into it, like young and old people, like, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. So how many analysts are at RMIN?
There are 8 in this unit, but then
Mhm.
that's separate from our CFE group. We've got about 4 certified fraud examiners. So if you include that unit, there's 12. And then we've got a separate unit that handles audio and visual forensics, and then the computer forensics, or digital forensics unit. So we've got quite a few analysts. We're stacked pretty deep out here.
How does cases get assigned to RMIN and then get assigned to you?
So everybody who is in risk, by the way, this is just a shameless plug. If you are in your agency and you already have a risk account, pretty much it's like based off of how many people are in your agency, you get billed by a percentage of that. It's really cheap for the agency to pay those dues to risk. You can get registered with RMIN and put in, or even risk if you're not in that network where you might be talking to a lot larger scale. So if you're in one of our sister centers, you can get registered with RIS and put in for some support. We, of course, RIS is our bread and butter is operation deconfliction, so blue on blue
Mhm.
prevention. We do risk intel, so for information storing and intelligence storing for criminal intelligence. We're 28 CFR compliant, CJIS compliant, and then they can put in analytical support or intelligence support requests. So if you're doing some intelligence research stuff, we have a lot of resources at our disposal to help identify people. We've got facial rec programs. We run Flock. We run a bunch of different paid softwares for intelligence gathering on whether it's social media or otherwise. But that's the intelligence side of things. And then analytical, you can put in for case support and investigative case support, and that's our unit. So all of that's through RIS. You can get registered and put in your request, and we can help you along the way. We don't commandeer any investigations. We help support them, and we at the end of it we write a report on our findings. And if you ever call us to testify as far as our analytical products and reports are concerned, then we'll be there for you.
Well, let's get into a case then. And this brings us to your analyst badge story. And for those that may be new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career defining case or project that an analyst works. So it's about 2021, and you get assigned a homicide.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I first thought. I had this like misconception that like maybe the new guy isn't going to get these homicide cases. They're probably going to give me some like property crimes cases or throw me some low hanging fruit as far as like easy cases are concerned. That isn't a thing. It's based on how many cases are currently assigned to everybody in the unit. They like to make sure that everybody's got an even amount of caseload so that nobody's drowning in casework, and they want to get everybody familiar with how to handle different types of data analysis, really, because we get things varying as far wide as bank records if you're doing financial analysis, or GPS tracking records, whether it be GPS like from a search warrant return from a social media platform or even from a carrier. We've seen records. I've seen records that were like from a car tracker because somebody was stalking. So we get things far and wide in terms of like case support requests. I've had stalking, homicide cases. I presented at the conference about archaeological resources preservation. People were trying to steal resources from public lands and fossils and artifacts. I've had all types of cases, just a plethora of different types of analysis for investigation. So yeah, I was thrown right into it essentially. I mean, this is probably one of maybe the second or third cases I'd ever touched. And it was pretty complex at the time because I didn't really have all an overview of everything, of all the pieces, until I had to dive into all the reports and then got an idea of like what this digital evidence was all about. Of course, I had to take some training on like CDR analysis because they requested for us to map. They requested for us to make some demonstratives of some of that mapped activity, some of the communication activity. So yeah, I got thrown into it with a homicide case right away.
All right, so let's get into the details of the case. What's the scenario and what specifically is your goal?
Well, it was an attempted homicide out of North Las Vegas. The suspect, who had some gang, involvement and some obvious drug usage, was accusing his wife of being unfaithful to him. Mind you, this might have been under the influence of some kind of drug that was making him paranoid or whatever. But he ended up, and I guess they were separated or something for a time, but he ended up convincing her to meet up with him, and during which time he kidnapped her. He took her to his place and did a lot of things. I mean, including tying her up and heating up a knife with a torch and burning her skin.
Oh.
Tried to steal all of her money. Mind you, she gave a victim statement when it first happened. She was distraught that her husband, or maybe even a strange husband, was trying to kill her. Apparently, he drove her out to the desert and to some area that was between Arizona and Nevada, and tied her up, duct taped her hands, shot her through her hands while they were tied up. Made her run through the desert. Just a bunch of stuff. Horrible torture that she endured for about 2 days, three total, but 2 nights. So it was a lot of pretty much victim statement is what we had to go off of. And mind you, this victim showed up in a hospital is what happened. And that's how they got the investigation in their hands, or how it started rather. So they're working their way backwards. They're trying to figure out how long has it been since these wounds were inflicted on the gal. And when they got her statement, she was very cooperative. But as time goes on, this case, it was like probably a 2018 DR. So this was long before I was even here at RMIN. And I don't even know when they submitted the case to us. It might have been years later. And sometimes that happens if they hit a wall and they need some help later on down the line. It's not always fresh that we get these investigative requests. It just so happened that they had so much digital evidence that they wanted to kind of put everything together. So by that time coming back around, for some reason they made amends. I don't know how that's even possible, but they made amends. It's like, you try to kill me, I forgive you. And she was not cooperative anymore. In fact, she was trying to recant her statement, and we'd already at that point received her statement. We've got all this digital evidence back. And they've got a bunch of physical evidence. They ended up doing a search warrant at the apartment and find the torch. They found the knife. They find the black marks on it. They ended up finding the vehicle where he was shooting, where he had like shot through her hands, and they saw that there were like penetration in the door from like the ballistics or whatever that were from the inside projected out essentially. So there was already a lot of good police work and investigative case work done into this thing, but we wanted the digital evidence to also paint that same picture. So I remember what I did on the outset was like created a timeline based off of her original statement. And I just used it as my framework, and I started to just dig into those records, and I started to see who was calling her at the time, or who was she communicating with at the time that she said that she was, taken into his custody via kidnap. And I found records that were showing, yeah, he reached out to her device, her son's device, even trying to reach out, and some of the mapped activity showed him in the area where she lived. But remember that those metropolitan areas, if they're really close to each other, you're looking at cell site usage, which is not exactly lending itself to a precise location. It's kind of areas. But you put those into context with what she's saying in that statement. For example, like before leaving town, he was trying to get access to her bank and her money. Well, apparently there was a phone call made to her family to bring out her purse. And so there's that record to her dad's phone that he was trying to make that phone call before leaving town. And then right after that phone call, shortly after, there's a call to the bank. And it's like, I looked in his call detail records. I think it was about a year's worth of records, if I remember correctly. And there's never been an attempt to that bank up until that day. So suddenly now he's calling that bank out of nowhere, right before the records show that he leaves town. So I showed those things like in a demonstrative and as the sequence, pretty much how she stated in hers and her original statement. And I just let the records show how those were actually in sync with what she originally stated and not recanting. And then there were some other messages received from like the victim's sister, like, what did you do with my sister? I know you have her. And so there's a lot of that going on. And then you do see the mapped activity go to some area in the desert between Nevada and Arizona. So all those things seem to be aligning themselves to the investigation. And it's like, wow, it's awesome to see that the data is going to line up with these, what we know to be true statements in the beginning. So, yeah.
So it seems to me from what's being asked of you, the reason RMIN's in play to begin with is, since the victim in this case is recanting, more evidence needs to be developed if we're going to pull her statement out of the equation, to fill in those gaps that testimony is going to leave. And so you're still trying to tell the story of the crime just without her testimony.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not always that case. Sometimes they just want to be able to and that's the other thing with RMIN, is we always have the mindset of everything that we're going to produce, we want to have it prepared so that if it's going to be used as a trial product, that it could be, I guess, palatable, understandable from a perspective of a juror. And you don't know what the average, education level is or communication level as far as vocabulary is concerned. It's got to be really simple and easy to understand and digest. So all of our casework, even though it can get somewhat complex, even with the data, we have to make it so that it's easy to comprehend and quickly easy to comprehend. So we pride ourselves in making sure that we're thorough in our work, but also simple.
Now, in this particular case, did you have to establish any assumptions? I know you were going based on the data, but was there anything where it's like, well, this isn't clear in terms of the data, but we think this is what happened? Was there anything where you had to make a conclusion type of thing?
Yeah, you have to do some, like all of our reports do have an area for, say, suggestions, recommendations, essentially, if they're going to take your recommendation as an expert. But most of the time, you just want to give your findings from an unbiased, not a non-narrative perspective. Here are the facts of what we found in these records. So we know for a fact that we can't say that the person was doing this based off these records, but we could say, hey, that person's device traveled from Nevada to Arizona during the time frame stated on the victim's original statement. And we can say the device communicated with the victim's family, the suspect's device communicated with the victim's bank, which it never done before. I remember even when I was going to testify at jury trial on this thing, because that's where it ended up going, I spoke with the prosecuting attorney, awesome guy. He was asking me, hey, I noticed that in one of your notes that you were talking about what was on the cell phone versus the call detail records, and because of course they got an image, a Celebrite of the actual device, and I said, yeah, and I happen to notice like the count on a call detail record is going to be a true count. They're not going to omit any records from there. But when you get a Celebrite, you might have a situation where the individual deletes voice or even SMS transactions. So it's like, well, they tried to delete some things, but according to the original records, there's this many outgoing calls at that time. So when I got pulled in, a lot of it was even some of the statistical stuff. They're saying, hey, give us a comparison of the total amount of outgoing phone calls and the amount of outgoing messages that you really see, because there might be some deleted here. So Yeah, it always depends on what the case agent requests, and that's kind of a little bit of a difficult thing. We're sort of a go-between law enforcement, like the investigator, the detective, and the prosecuting attorney. Because sometimes what the case agent originally wants, the people who are submitting, the detective wants to get something that's going to lead to further PC, so they can get more supplements like investigative leads, or they can submit to charging. And then what the attorney wants on the back end of that is a few things that they can show to demonstrate in court. So we like to keep ourselves available throughout the entire process. It's like start to finish. We're going to get you all the way through prosecution and beyond if it goes to appeal.
All right. So this particular attempted homicide with the rekindled lovebirds here, how did this case end?
Well, it ended up being successfully prosecuted. He was convicted. I can't recall how many years he got, but it was for the attempted homicide and all of the counts of, I guess, I don't want to say the wrong charge here because I'm more familiar with Arizona statutes, but it's like serious bodily injury is a big charge, but the attempted homicide was, of course, what stuck there. So yeah, he's in prison out there, and that was a successful prosecution, and it was a success story from RMIN. So actually, yeah, the district attorney wrote a success testimonial about it. So that was a great thing. It was an awesome connection to have been made and to go out there to Clark County and testify, and it was great under the unfortunate circumstances for her. Yeah, but
so, and you got another one here at Arizona Vehicular Homicide.
yeah, that I wouldn't say that one went as far out as like jury trial or anything like that, but I will say it's a bad story because you had some people. So here's the thing: you get some of the smaller agencies that reach out that just don't have a lot of the resources that RMIN has, as far as like analytical software or time, or even a unit designated to give support with that. And then you get some of the bigger agencies reaching out for support, and that also feels good because it's like, they know that we've got a solid rapport, a solid working relationship. We got a request out of here, Arizona DPS, and I'd already worked vehicular homicide investigations before this, so this was nothing new. But what I really liked was that the case agent that sent the data over had already done the extraction on the device. They were just trying to see if this driver, essentially, of a semi truck was distracted while they were driving and collided into a string of vehicles that led to the deaths. I believe it was like 5 people.
Oh.
And at the time, I think the excuse was, I'm on my work tablet or something of that nature. And it just so happened that the individual was on TikTok. But when I got the records at the time, I didn't know what application was being used more than any other. So on some devices, depending on the type of device, there's a really, detailed device log of when your phone is unlocked, when it was relocked, and what applications were launched, essentially. And I got to dig into some of the I guess the weeds of a Cellbrite return. You get some of your parsed data, which is really nice, but I had to go dig into some of the unparsed data, and going into some of those reports, they come out in like hex format, hexadecimal, and like you're like, man, this thing needs to be converted into like UTC 1970 and then converted again. And it was kind of confusing, honestly. And it was the first time I'd noticed that a carrier can keep track of like websites visited. I didn't know that, but yeah, at the time they sent a return from AT&T and it was showing websites that were visited. So I was able to use both the AT&T records and the unparsed database records from a Cellbrite return to confirm like this person was in fact distracted driving. They were watching a video a few moments leading up to the accident. And unfortunately, they were given, I think it was like 20 years for those counts, something like that. It was like, it was equivalent to like 4 years per individual that was killed. So if there were 5 victims, it was about 4 years per person. I remember it being 20 to 22 years, which you would think is pretty low. But if that person didn't have any prior criminal history, they might have given them maybe on the low end of the presumptive sentencing guideline here in Arizona. So, but it was still a successful outcome because the individual pled out. And the other thing was, before we got through with our analysis, they were trying to push back. I guess their defense team was trying to push back quite a bit. And as soon as we submitted our final report, it wasn't very long before we heard that he took a plea. So that was a great success,
So wait a minute, you mentioned that he was on TikTok?
Yeah.
So he's driving a rig and he's on a tablet And is he watching TikTok? I'm sure hoping that he's not recording a TikTok video as he's driving.
I don't know. It wasn't that. I don't believe it was recording it from based off of my recollection. It was he had his work tablet and he was trying to say he was like fussing with his work tablet and getting a message from whatever it is that was sending him a message on there. Which I did notice there were like some transactions, but not close enough to the collision in time. Not close enough in time to the collision that it would have been the reason why he was looking down. No, some of that data when it's not parsed, it actually has a lot of details, like when the application was launched, how long they watched the video for, and everything like that. So the durations.
Man, no, that's a interesting on your side of the coin, because you sounds like your findings in that report that was submitted influenced the play, but it's also an awful case because 5 people lost their lives.
Yeah, tragically, yes.
So if you're an analyst from a smaller agency that is in one of the states, you listed them before, but it's worth we're listing again. If you're from a smaller jurisdiction from Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, or Wyoming, and that you're looking for additional help with your cases, what's the process to ask for help from you all?
So on RISnet, or even RMIN, once you're into like the RMIN part of that, there's a link to our case management system in there, and you can request access to that case management system to submit a new request. And once that's reviewed by our management, so pretty much either my supervisor or his manager, our unit manager, they review the case, and whether it's something that RMIN is able and willing to take on, then once that's approved, then we'll begin to work on that. But remember that there's 8 of us, and if we're covering those states and we've got hundreds of member agencies, and I'm probably not even saying the right number. I'm sure it's probably something like 2,000, but we've got everything from local, territorial, tribal, federal, all of these agencies in between for all of those states. There's a lot of requests that come through. So they are on a first come, first serve, but there also are some levels of priority that are given to people that are coming up with like hearing deadlines, in custody deadlines. So we take those into consideration when we handle our case management, whether it's like time allotment to rush cases that are like active investigations, somebody's like on the loose, a whodunit, you know. And we're not operational. We don't have sworn people here, but because some of the cases that come in are still active and they're very fresh in terms of those investigations, we try to get moving on a lot of those when they come in. And then we still get cold cases. I've been one of the people that have been trying to champion for having our own cold case unit here, because one of the oldest cases I think we have is like 1985, if I'm not mistaken, a homicide out of Montana. We got another one that's like in 1981, I believe it is. Those are the oldest ones we have as far as time is concerned. I don't think that we received them in 1985, mind you. We probably got them in the 2000s or maybe late 2020s, early 2020s. But yeah, I mean, some of those requests are pretty far back. They only recently heard about RMIN and what we can do to help them out.
I'm looking at your resume, and you have several trainings that you've completed, and I'm just curious, is there, with what you're doing and what the tasks that you're being asked, is there 1 or 2 particular trainings that you've taken over the last couple of years that you really thought helped you out and that you thought was really pertinent?
I'd have to say I can't attribute the growth or even my level of understanding for these types of analysis I can't attribute it to one particular training. I think it's a combination of the trainings and the hands-on and just learning from colleagues that have been doing it for so long that makes it possible to do this kind of work. But I mean, I'll give a shout out to Alpha Group Center. They have awesome courses on criminal investigative analysis. So Steve Gottlieb, get with him about that. I did his program through Cal State, and they have a great program on that. But I've also taken some criminal investigation courses at ASU, and some of the software training that I received, like whether it was through Nighthawk or PLX, a lot of those software have kind of equipped me to do things, and I think a more directed, like focused way, where it's like I'm using my time wisely. I know exactly how much effort and time it's going to take me to do each of these tasks because I can use the resources at my disposal. I'll give an example. Like Cellbrite and Nighthawk are two really like useful resources to have if you're looking at, say, search warrant returns from social media carriers that have a lot of conversational analysis to be done, a lot of communication to look through. I will get one of those returns and I'll throw them into Cellbrite's parsing tool, so PA, essentially physical analyzer, and it'll give you back something that you can easily digest. But then I can throw things into Nighthawk and look for word intersects, so I could search that against data that exists and give it like a list of words, for example, and I can find conversations of interest in the drop of a hat. And then that's when you start to dig into the context of those conversations. So learning how to manage my time wisely with the resources at our disposal took me going to those trainings, but also knowing what to look for. Because sometimes, and my boss, Mike Soto, he always likes to chime on this one. He always says, "Hey, is the juice worth the squeeze?" Sometimes you don't have time to read 100,000 pages of a search warrant return that is your Facebook return. Sometimes you get a PDF and it's like 20,000 pages, and it's like every like and comment and post on somebody's profile for all time. It's like, I've got to narrow this focus into what's pertinent to this investigation. And so when you go into this, you don't want to dive into the rabbit hole without having some kind of nexus into how does this tie into my investigation, whether it be time frame of interest, locations of interest, and then putting your focus into those right away so that you can tackle those and give your case agent a brief. And the other thing I learned from experience in this field is, even though a lot of times analysts will be kind of introverted, if you're in communication with your detectives, if you're in communication with your officers, it's going to make your job a lot easier, because what might not be relevant to you is probably very relevant to their investigation, and you're possibly overlooking something that they need. So don't assume like this is not important because you don't know what you don't know. So when I will say, for example, when I get a request to map some data or some call detail record activity, some cell site location history information, I'll reach out to the case agent and I'll get them on a Teams chat and I'll say, "Hey, I'm seeing this. Does any of this look important to you, useful to you? Subject A is laying their head down right here, and it seems to be that they're doing this." Or maybe you might want to put some resources, if they're like, say, a missing person, toward this area. This is where the device last signaled off of a tower, and those range in terms of like anywhere between 15 to 25 miles as far as like their connectivity is concerned. So you're like somewhere in this radius, like it's possible that they're in this area because the device is still pinging off that tower. So knowing that stuff in context to an investigation is like, it's so vital that you communicate with your case agents and with your officers.
We have a manager at my office that uses that saying and asking if the juice is worth the squeeze. So that's interesting that you have that same saying at your office.
Oh, we don't like to say it. We actually don't even like to repeat it. You hear it so many times, you're like, I'm irritated, but it's true,
Back to the Alpha Group training. I'm interested to get your opinion on something, because it seems, I won't say it's a controversy. That's probably too harsh. But some people like the fact that with the Alpha Group training, you're doing stuff by hand, you're doing stuff by a calculator, you're learning without a computer, and then other people find that totally absurd, in that like you're always going to have a computer, and so why are we doing all this stuff by hand? And those are really the two extremes. From your perspective, where do you land on those two sides of the coin?
So like at university, I was trying to understand what the heck was going on. They were trying to make us calculate sum of all squares by hand with a pencil and an eraser, and a lot of errors along the way. And I'm like, cool, I'm glad we're doing this analysis in criminal justice. That's going to take me an entire semester to do one problem set. It's like, I guess nobody in the world is ever going to have a computer or whatever. But then I take a similar training with Alpha Group, and I forget which section it's under. I think it's crime analysis applications or something like that. And or it's like, I believe it's something of that nature. I forget which breakout session it's under. It's probably crime analysis applications, that you actually have to go through and do some like forecasting, and you have to get this series essentially and write a report on it. And it's like, this is awesome, because now I'm using Excel because they have formulas, and I'm understanding this from a larger perspective, because now I'm writing a report on my findings and I'm giving recommendations, and it's like that was more hands-on and applicable, I feel like, than my criminal justice undergrad degree, when they had me hand jamming numbers that were pretty much, I'm sure they were conducive to crime in terms of like rates or something per populace or whatever, but per capita, I didn't think it was as useful as like giving insight into a series, a crime series, like the way that Alpha Group does. So I felt like it was a good cross between the research and the investigative analysis of things. I felt like there are equivalent trainings that are just as demanding. Like after having gone through Arizona's Analyst Academy, that's going to give you, like, I guess, a better solid foundation, because it requires more time. There's more sections to cover, but they were all challenging in their own way. I mean, comparing those to not just undergrad, but graduate level work, I felt like they all kind of are in step as far as their challenge. And I don't think anybody should be knocking anybody else's program until you go through it. If you haven't completed that program, don't knock about it.
Okay. So if you're creating a training, are you going to have more hands-on non-computer stuff, or are you going to stick just to the computer?
I think there's something valuable to knowing how the sausage is made, is essentially like we have mapping software, for example, and if I get a call detail record and the cell site location history and information, are we going to be able to plot that on a map physically? The answer should be yes. So without a software, you should be able to like figure out, hey, where are these coordinates on the records, to be able to actually plot them if I had to do it myself. But we also know that I'm not going to plot months of records for the sake of time and resources. Like, even though we can do it, should we do it? Should we rely on these softwares wholeheartedly? And that's the big question, even about using AI and all that. But it's like, yes, rely on the expedited nature of these softwares and what they allow you to do, but grasp why they do this and what works, and also to be able to check it to make sure that it's always accurate. And you want to be able to technically review that and make sure that these records are what they are supposed to be. So if there is an error with those software, you got to be able to stand by your work and still say, hey, I checked the software, I didn't see any errors, but if there are any anomalies essentially that happen, then that's probably just a coding thing from their standpoint. But then you might have somebody's future in your hands. If you're saying that, say, a device is somewhere like at a crime scene and it really wasn't there, then that's something very serious. So it's like, know your work, stand by your work, and know your data. I'll harp on that, is always know your data.
All right, very good. All right, let's get to the advice section now for our listeners. What advice do you have? I know you've given a little bit already, but what else you got for us?
Yeah, I always say don't be afraid of the data. Get connected to your local risk center. Shameless plug. Still always say that. If it's even a data set you've never looked at before, try to understand context clues. It's like language stuff. You might have taken Spanish back in high school like everybody else, and you forgot it by the time you're an adult. But what they told you back in those times, or even when you're learning to read in grade school and you're learning to read at a new grade level, essentially, you might not understand the word, but look at the word and its context to find those clues. And that's the same thing with data. Data is going to give you clues about what it's showing, even if you've never looked at, say, a search warrant return from a carrier or from a random thing like a vehicle or any kind of platform that gives you location or communications or whatever it is that you're looking at. It's like, get yourself very familiar with that data before you start going in there and trying to, well, for one, before you give up, but before you start trying to collate that data and format things, you want to make sure you understand what you're looking at before you start doing work on those data. So that's a big one I have, is a lot of us are going to handle data from one extent to another. I don't know whether you're doing some strategic stuff and you're exporting crystal reports or whatever it is that you're getting from your RMS, or if you're looking at search warrant returns like I am, sometimes those things get a little bit complicated. And that's why I presented on Snapchat through the conference. It's because it's like, never be afraid to just dive in there. Even if you don't have a lot of money for your agency to buy software, it's like find a workaround.
All right, good. I see you're a member of the Arizona Organized Retail Crime Association. which I'm not really all that familiar with retail crime associations. So I'm curious what you're getting out of it and whether you would recommend to the listeners if they have such an association that they could be a part of.
Admittedly, I haven't really been as involved with them as of late because one of my
Mhm.
colleagues, Vanessa Martinovici, she is doing a lot more Orca stuff. That's what they call it. So she's more hands-on with them lately. I'm still on the Aura platform in case they ever need investigative support. Sometimes we'll see that, hey, they haven't identified somebody that's been involved in a lot of these like organized retail thefts and they need help identifying. So I'll shoot those over to our intelligence research group to help them maybe scrape and see if they can find people. But yeah, it's mostly geared toward organized retail crimes that are, say, over a certain dollar threshold, or they're using instruments to like cut off sensors and all those, asset protection measures. So,
Mhm.
and by Arizona statute, it's already a felony when you go in there with an instrument to actually remove those kinds of sensors and things. But it's
Mhm.
also people that are doing fraudulent things like trying to resell those and stage those because they've stolen them in bulk, say, for example, whatever the item is at the time.
Mhm.
So a lot of that has to do with fraud. And I know that, again, I'm not as hands-on in some of this stuff, but my colleague Vanessa, she was involved heavily in like a lot of the gypsy investigations, for lack of a better term. I know
Mhm.
it's a bit of a, what's the word, derogative term, but
Mhm.
that's what a lot of those investigations call them, like the gypsy travelers. But she was involved because she knows Romanian, so she was involved in translating for a lot of those investigations, and I think she does an excellent job of doing that and staying connected with the Orca. So I attend the meetings here and there,
Mhm.
and I'm there if I see a bulletin that needs to be forwarded along, but that's pretty much the extent of what I do for them.
Yeah, I could see where that would be needed, an association, because some of these groups travel, as you mentioned, and if they're going to go through one small town to the next, you want to make sure that the word gets out that there's a potential for this group coming to a town near you.
For sure.
And then I guess let's get your thoughts on the conference. As I mentioned, we met at the IACA conference in Vegas. Was that your first IACA conference?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you think?
I was really impressed. The folks
Yeah.
that presented were very sharp. I mean, some of it even flew over my head, and I have a pretty good grasp of some of these concepts. And I was just like, wow. I mean, shout outs to a lot of people that were giving complex ones, but one of the earlier ones that stood out was like Stephen Lerner's Telegram. I don't know if you caught
Hmm.
that one,
I did
but
not.
that one was into the weeds on scraping the open internet and diving into JSON files and
Hmm.
importing them into Excel. And I'm like, this is a whole other level, man. You're coding in
Yeah.
here. It's crazy. So
Yeah. It's a lot, and I think it's interesting as you go through the conference, and you have a lot of first timers, right? You actually have a lot of one and dones, meaning that they'll just go to the conference once and then maybe never go ever again, right? There's, I think, half the conference every year is first timers, and then you get folks like Old Man Elder here who's been to, I don't know, I think I've lost count. I think I've missed 2 years since 2008, whatever that ends up being. But it's interesting, just from my vantage point, seeing the different presentations, seeing what's been repeated over the years, seeing what's brand new, seeing some of the technological stuff. Certainly a lot, from my vantage point, some of the AI stuff was fascinating. I sat through some Power BI training, which I never really had any exposure to. So that was fascinating to me. So, but yeah, no, I think overall it was good. And my presentation, I think it was good. As I said, I haven't got the results back from the survey, so I'm still not ready to call it a full success just yet.
well, I mean, I don't. Well, you should be able to get those results, by the way. If you go to this event page on your desktop and under like speaker resources where you have to like put in your bio and everything like that, you should be able to see the results of the survey. But I will say this, and don't let it discourage you. I don't think a lot of people participate in those surveys. I hate to say it because I had maybe something like for session one of my topic, there were maybe about 140 people that like registered to attend, assuming that number is kind of in line. I didn't really get a full count, but I think there was about 100 people in there. I think there were maybe like 4 people that responded to the survey, something like that, 4 to 7. So it's a small fraction. And if of that fraction you get one bad review, that's
Yeah.
not conducive to the entire opinion of your session. So
Well, yeah, well, and I'm sure there was plenty of documentation, there was plenty of word getting out. I didn't realize that you had to check the box that you were attending the session in the app in order to review it. Because I wanted to go back. I thought I could go back later and then write my reviews. I was going to just, as I had some time in the evening, write up my reviews for each one of the ones that I attended that day. And you're like, no, you can't do that. You can't go back. So you have to flag it in the app in order to even review it. So I know for me, that was something that's like, oh, I didn't realize that. And ones that I did want to review, I could not review. So that I think that's more on the Cvent app than everything else. I guess there's a chance that somebody reviews a session that they really didn't go to. That doesn't seem, I don't know. I don't think that's as big. That wouldn't be as big as my concern as people that were in my boat where they wanted to do a review but couldn't because they didn't check it early enough, right?
out of curiosity, is this the first time or first couple times that they used the Cvent app the way they did?
Seems like we've been using Cvent for a couple of years. I don't remember, and you're going off of old man Elder's bad memory. I don't remember that aspect of like, oh, you have to flag it in order to be able to review it. I don't remember that. If that's been there, I guess people that are listening to this find one of our postings in here for this episode and just kind of write a comment that yeah, they did it. They did it that last year, or they didn't do it last year. I don't remember that being a thing. If I obviously didn't do it last year or did it the year before because it was brand new to me this year that we had to do that. So, but I know we've used Cvent in the past.
Okay. I thought it was useful. I thought it was very resourceful. It's just I don't know if maybe everybody was using it to its fullest capacity or its fullest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing too, is like if you're just using it just to find out what the schedule is, it just seems like you really need an app for that. I mean, because you could just post that in a PDF on the website for that, right? And if there's changes, you update it there, right? I'm not sure. I'm sure that can be reviewed and taken into consideration to see what's best and moving forward. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what all the attendees get out of the app.
And I mean, in my opinion, for what it's worth, it would have been nice to not just connect like within the confines of Cvent because there's a way to connect with people on there. But if you gave somebody the option to like throw their business contacts into Cvent under the connection area for the profile, then on that page, when you go into the individual's name instead of just connecting on the application, you can actually have contact cards stored, so you can like program them in or have a way to email them directly and say, hey, it was cool to meet you at the conference, because I remember going pretty much outside of the Cvent app to try and find everybody and say it was awesome connecting with you, here's my information, or I had to like share my desk line or my phone number or my email in Cvent, and hopefully that they'd still go back and see it. And it's like it may not be the case. So I got some business cards which turned out good. But
yeah, all right, very good. All right, well, let's take some calls. We got a couple of callers on the line. We're gonna play favorite first jobs. Speaking of the Alpha Group, I always tell this story that the reason this segment exists is because of Steve Gottlieb. Steve was a radio DJ at like 16, 17 years old in his hometown, hosted a Sunday morning talk show, and or I guess a Sunday morning radio show, I should say. And so we like to ask these questions of our analysts, what our favorite first jobs are. So first on the line is Patrick. Patrick, which one of your favorite first jobs?
Favorite first jobs was being a security guard and ticket taker at a dirt track racing in Western Pennsylvania. Boy, the things you see.
So I am from Pennsylvania, and I've actually been to a dirt track. Sharon, Pennsylvania is a place that I've been to. For those that may not be familiar with the reference, that's going to be very Carney-esque. That's going to be like fairgrounds. That's going to be traveling circus type things.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like you, Patrick, I worked as a security guard in a lot of different settings. I worked events over at ASU, and I worked at the gate, similar to what you're doing. But I also worked on the field a couple times, and it was cool to be like standing next to these huge players, and you're supposed to pay attention to like the crowd and the environment, make sure there's not anybody sneaking onto the field. But you catch yourself watching the game, you're like, this is like a crazy energy. I'd never been to a college game, and I was like, this is so cool that I get to be down here and get paid to be down here. But sometimes the other security jobs that you do, you're posted up in a shack in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, this is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. So hats off to you, man, for doing the kind of work.
All right, next on the line is Dallas. Dallas, which one of your favorite first jobs?
My favorite first job was selling vacuums door to door, lugging around the vacuum and demoing it in the person's house and cleaning up their disgusting carpets and then leaving with my dirty vacuum.
Oh my gosh, was it Kirby?
It was
Oh.
rainbow vacuums. I
Oh.
did that in between after I had joined the military, but I was waiting to ship off for basic training. I had like a few months, and
Oh,
that
man.
was, I found it like in the newspaper. I was like, okay, I could do this. I wore my mom's old suit like from the late 80s with the shoulder pads.
Oh my
At
gosh.
18 years old.
Oh
Horrible.
man, that's great.
There was a couple like older couples that would invite me in, and then I think they just felt so bad for me that they'd ask me to stay for dinner, and they'd feed me,
man.
which was way better than getting like, I don't know, 50-cent tacos from somewhere, because that's all
Yeah.
I could afford.
Going door to door. Only certain people can do that. The whole solicitation thing, that is real sales there, going door to door and trying to sell a product. And as she mentioned, that the people probably just feeling sorry for her and saying like, "Hey, have some food while you're doing your presentation."
Yeah, I'd feel for her too, man. It's hard. For one, I don't open the door for those people, especially because I have a ring. I'm like, nope. But worse if you're the person that has to be out there in the heat and wearing all the clothing to look professional, semi-professional, and you're out there doing chores and you're in your nice clothes. You're like, this job is not paying anything what it's worth. I'll tell you that. So
Yeah. Oh. All right. Next on the line is Pam. Pam, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
Yeah, I worked at Taco Bell. And I learned working at Taco Bell that I probably could never work dispatch because I had to repeatedly ask people to repeat their order. And then when they would ask for extra toppings, like especially on burritos, we're like, let's add like extra sour cream or whatever. And one time, I think we sent out a burrito that weighed like 4 pounds. Like we got in really big trouble for that.
yeah. Well, Pam, all I have to say about that is, heck yeah, my girl. Give me that extra sour cream, extra wok. I love employees like you that stack up the burrito. Like I'll go to Chipotle and I swear this like the meat's coming out of these people's checks. They give you like a half a spoonful, you know, and I'm like, what are you guys doing over there? They got to treat you guys better if you're giving me like a quarter of a spoon. It's like, fill that thing up, daddy. I'm trying to get that protein. And
yeah, well, speaking of Chipotle, so they had something interesting there where what would happen is people started filming them. I say film, recording them with their phone while they were making their burrito to show how skimpy they were being with the ingredients. And a lot of the employees complained, saying like it was just really uncomfortable being recorded and then knowing that they could be on TikTok or whatever it is. And they were obviously told to skimp on the ingredients or whatever it is, because they usually were plentiful. We go to Chipotle every month, and so I know what to expect going in there. This year, it's definitely been more skimpy on the fillings than in previous years.
Do not get me started, Jason. I know that if I order out like takeout from there, they're gonna, because you're not there to watch, they're gonna put less on that thing, dude. And I'm saying, Pam, go apply for Chipotle in my town, because I'm like, stack me up, Buttercup. I'm ready to go.
Love it. All right, next on the line is Andrew. Andrew, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Favorite first job, Chick-fil-A. So back in the days, Chick-fil-A didn't have the cows, they had chickens. So my first job, 15 years old, dressing up as Doodles the chicken in Rome, Georgia.
Oh my goodness. And did you have to be like outside the restaurant waving at cars?
All the time, and it was hot as all get out.
That's one of those jobs that when I see people like holding signs out front and dancing and all this other stuff, I don't think there's an amount of money that somebody could pay me to do that for like
Yeah.
8 hours. I know they get
Yeah,
breaks
man.
and whatnot, but that's not anything that I'd ever want to do.
$4.25 an hour. Minimum wage back then in Georgia.
Oh, love it. And it's funny when he said Chick-fil-A, I just assumed he was doing drive-through or working inside somewhere. He really threw me when he was like, "Yeah, I'm the mascot."
Yeah, man. And especially if you're dressing up in a costume in the heat, it's like, cancel that, return to sender. I ain't doing it.
That had to be brutal. And man, well, even today, I don't know if they have the cows as mascots. I don't know, but I gotta believe that not only is it hot and everything else, people are probably throwing stuff at you too.
Look, man, I don't do the costume thing. Like, I haven't done trick-or-treating since I was like probably 9 years old, because in Arizona, I'm sorry, it's still hot in October. I'm not dressing up in any kind of this fake plastic so I can go sweat it out for 2 pieces of candy. Now I'm good.
All right, very good. Our last caller is Peter. Peter, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
My favorite first job is going back to 14, 15, 16-year-old working landscape as, a summer job in high school, being much older now, working in the office setting, 8 to 4, 9 to 5s. I love what I do, but I'd be lying if I didn't think back to those summers of, biking to work with a cooler, working out in the sun all day, mowing lawns and, doing landscaping and everything, during simpler times. So love what I do now, but, I definitely find myself sometimes staring out the window, thinking back to those older days.
It's funny. Me and the sun don't get along, so I just barely get through if I'm working Saturday and Sunday outside in the yard. So I could definitely not do like 5 days a week or 6 days a week out in the sun all day. That's not going to work out well for me.
I'm with you on that one, Jason. I mean, I respect the nostalgia, Pete, because I'm like with that too, like throwing back to the old days. But working outside, look, I've done it for years, buddy, before I ever came out here in the office. And I'm so glad that I'm inside. I'll never go back out again as long as I can help it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like it. I like just doing it on my own terms or doing it when I feel like it, but not all the time, Monday through Friday or even Saturday. No, thank you. So, all right. So that is favorite first jobs. If you have a favorite first job that you want to share with the show, email us at leapodcasts@gmail.com. All right, Jesus, let's finish up with words to the world then. So this is where you can promote any idea that you wish. What are your words to the world?
I'm going to just share some wisdom because I heard this years back and I feel like it's been so resourceful and applicable to every job I've ever taken on. The key to getting along with absolutely just about anybody and everybody are these 2 principles. Never expect anything from anyone and take nothing personally. If you always are under the assumption that somebody's out to get you, or that you expect them to do whatever it is in your mind, nobody can read your mind to know what you expect. And if you think that they're always out to get you, then you're going to have like this like self-fulfilling prophecy and everything's going to be against you. So I'd say don't take it personally and don't expect anybody to do anything because they can't read minds. So, and now I'm not saying to be a doormat. You're not a paid punching bag where they throw in the dollar and they punch you as hard as they can kind of thing. If you're always fighting and you're always complaining about the small stuff, then your leadership won't be able to separate those from the really important battles. So I say pick your battles and don't take anything to heart and don't expect it right away. Always grind to get where you're going.
Very good. Well, I leave every guest with you giving me just enough to talk bad about you later.
Yikes.
But I do appreciate you being on the show, Jesus. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
My pleasure. You too.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at l8podcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.